Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to use and organise layers in Autocad. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Start Drawing and we're just going to open up a random document here. I'm not setting up any particular page, I'm just going to show you how to use the layers properties. So the reason I'm showing this is a lot of students have problems with the organisation of their document, and also when it comes further down the line to changing various settings and various properties of their drawing, it can be very time consuming and very laborious because we haven't organised our layers into a way that streamlines any of these changes. So using the layers is actually pretty straightforward. Up at the top of the screen here, we've got layer properties. And we have various other settings, but the most important is this top bar here, which is our current layer. By default, you have layer 0. That's the current layer that you're working on, and if you keep drawing now, you'll be working on layer 0. If we click on the arrow to the right here to open up the menu, you'll see that layer 0 is all we've got. Once we add new layers, we'll get a long list down here like so. If we go into layer properties, it'll open up a separate window, and effectively it's the same as what we've just seen there in the drop down menu, but we can make quite a few changes. So talk you through what's going on here. On the left is just our directory. We don't really need to be bothered with that, so we'll close that down. And at the top here we've got things like add new layer, delete new layer, but most importantly we've got the actual layer and all its properties here. So we've got layer 0, we've got whether we can see it or not, we've got if the layer's locked, various other things. The elements that you're probably going to be most interested in are first of all the colour. So if we want a certain layer or the lines or the dimensions to have a certain colour, we can change that here. Our line type we can change. So currently layer 0 is set to a continuous line type, which means that it's just a solid line. If we click on load, you'll see that we get a vast library of all different line types we can use and import. If we go to line weight, you can again see that we've got loads of options here for line weight. We can choose how thick and thin our lines and annotations are. So currently we've got our default layer as 0. Now the golden rule for Autocad, and actually for many softwares, is to never draw on the first layer that you get, often the default layer. And that's because in many programs it can be difficult and impossible to delete layer 0 or make any changes to it. So always make sure you draw on new layers that you've added. To do that in Autocad, you're going to go up to the top here of our little window. You see we've got a little yellow mark, and when we hover over, we'll get new layer. If we click on that, you can see I've got layer 1 and the same settings that we can see above. So maybe when you're thinking about your organisation of your Autocad document, you want to give the layers names that mean something. So for example, I might call this ground plan. I may add a new layer that's called elevations. I might add a layer that's detail, maybe all the furnishings and embellishments that I make for my drawing, and almost always a new layer for dimensions. So I can turn off all the annotations of dimensions that I've added, and I can see the drawing just for what it is. Now, often you'll have your colour just set to white so that you can actually see what you're drawing on the background here. But maybe certain elements of your drawing need to have a different colour. So maybe you want your dimensions to be a certain colour, maybe let's say blue. And if we add a new layer and we add in a construction layer, all the construction details we need for our set or our design, maybe we'll give that an orange colour. These aren't any industry defined colour schemes, I'm just throwing in random colours for you to see the difference that they make. Okay, now on my ground plan and elevations, if they're just the wall details, maybe I want that line to be a bit thicker. So I can go to my line weight for my ground plan and maybe set it to something like 0.5 millimeters and click OK. Maybe I want to do the same for the elevations. again 0.5. If you're ever unsure on what line weight to put, think about the pencil that you would use if you were hand drawing this document. Would you use a 0.5mm pencil? Would you use a 0.25mm pencil? Use that as a guideline. For the detail, you see that currently it's set to default, and I think that default's something like 0.35. I'm going to change it to 0.25 here. For the dimensions, I'm going to leave it as default, and for the construction lines, I'm going to use it as default as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer called center line, because one of the first line style changes you'll become accustomed to when hand drawing a technical drawing is the center line and its dash and dot makeup. So for the center line, I wouldn't normally have that on a separate layer, but for purpose of demonstration, I'm going to change the line weight to, actually no, I'll leave the line weight as 0.25, but I'll change the line type to a, here we go, it's actually called center line here, a dash dot dash. Click OK. Now, even though I've clicked OK and you can see that the center line style has appeared, you see that my continuous line is blue, so still it's the continuous selection. We need to click on center line and click OK, and then it changes. You can see now that our center line layer has the line type set to center, and we'll change the color again just so it stands out. Let's give it a light pink there. So there's some layers. Again, these aren't a kind of industry standard layout. I'm just showing you the variation and what we can do with them. I'm going to close that window. Now, as I said, by default, you've got your layer selection to 0. If we go to the drop-down menu at the top of the screen now, you can see we've got all those layers. One of the things to be very careful of is that when you're drawing, not to get carried away. You know, you can very easily start drawing some details and then add some dimensions and then center lines and construction lines all on the same layer. It's very easy to forget to change your layer for each of these things. So make sure you get very used to doing that. Okay, so let's go to elevations and let's turn on snapping at the bottom right here. And let's just draw a rectangle as though it were for our wall. There we go. And now let's go to detail, which will have the thinner line. And maybe let's put a window. I've gone too high there. Let's undo that. There we go. There's our window. Let's go to our construction layer. And I don't know, maybe our set is hovering off the floor. Something like that. Something daft. Let's go to dimensions. And let's go to the, no, we don't need to go to annotate because it's on here on the home menu here. There's dimensions. Gonna click, click, and drag out. Let's go to center line and let's do a big cross like that. Okie doke. So you can see now that we've changed our layers and our layer properties, and that's being applied to our drawing, our lines, our hatching even, as long as we're on that layer, okay? So instead of having to change everything later on, change the colour of dimensions, change the colour of certain lines, do it right at the very start. Figure out what you're drawing, figure out what you're planning. One thing you may notice is that we changed the line weight for a couple of those layers. We changed it for elevations and ground plan. And there seems to be no line weight difference. And that's because by default, Autocad will hide the changes to the line weight just to make it a bit clearer and easier for you to draw. To change the view, to change the preview of Autocad, effectively to see the line weight as you're drawing, you need to go down to this little icon here, kind of 3 dashed lines with varying thicknesses. When you hover over it, it'll say show/hide line weight. Currently mine's set to off. And if I click on that, it turns it on, and now you can see the line weight changes. If you can't see the icon here for line weight, you need to go to the right hand side where it says customization, click on it, and you'll see we've got all these settings that are either visible with a tick or invisible with no tick. And you can currently see that line weight here is ticked. So if I untick that, you can see it then disappears. So if you can't find that on your bottom panel here, just go to the right and make sure that you've got it activated. So there we go. Real quick and easy demonstration of how to use, add, modify your layers, and a very useful thing for when you're first starting off your drawing to save yourself lots and lots of time at the end.